You're giving them a taste of what your story is in a way that they share your vision of what it could be. You're excited about your story. You need to present it to them in a way that they see its potential the same way that you do. So it's about creating that shared vision. Now, I gave you all this handout. Did anybody not get this handout? Did you not get my initial email about this session? It's an attachment to that initial email. Let's talk about opening emails now. Okay, you have this. And this it's kind of my approach to pitching. I have pitched my own projects to executives. As an executive, I've been on the receiving end of pitches from creatives. At the Seattle Film Festival, I participated in a pitch fest where I was partnered with a screenwriter, and I helped that screenwriter develop their concept and rehearse in a way that when we went out on stage, we won the pitch fest. So it's kind of its own little art form. It's a performance. You need to know your story really, really well. You need to know what's important about your story really, really well. Because there are so many details you could probably go into that don't matter. When you are pitching your story, you need to know what matters and focus on that entirely so that your audience understands what your film truly is. If they want to know more, it's because they are now engaged in your story. They want to know more. Come on in. So, at that point, it can expand into those details, but only once you've established the framework of what this story is, who your characters are, what world does it take place within. Once they understand that framework, then you can start getting into the details. So what we're going to be doing here, when you're pitching, you can pitch either as an individual or as part of a two-person team. It's up to you how you want to do it. Each pitch will be limited to no more than 5 minutes. So I would suggest you plan on a pitch that's like 2 or 3 minutes long. Leave some time for questions from the people you're pitching to. If you have successfully pitched your project, you're going to start getting questions. Usually, when you ask the question, so, do you have any questions? If nobody has any questions, it's probably because they don't care. So, you want to engage them. Get them to become a participant in your story. Pitch should focus on a short film concept that can be produced here at Central. The goal is for your stories to become a great script that can become a great short film. That can hopefully then go to a significant film festival and open up doors for everybody who has a hand in the creation of that film. A produced film with your name on it at a film festival is a game changer. That's what we're hoping will be the end result of this process. You pitch a great idea, it becomes a great script, becomes a great film, goes to festivals. Everyone now wants to talk to you. Cool, you have now won the game. The format, it can be a narrative. You can pitch a documentary. You can pitch an experimental film. As long as your pitch clearly conveys what your story is, what your film will ultimately become. 6 pitches will be presented in front of a live audience during the film festival. The Film Club board will be hearing preliminary pitches on Thursday 2 days from now. So they're going to want to know, what's your big idea? You want to say something?
Well, yeah, it's in this room. Please invite your friends. They have pictures as well. Oh yeah, it's at 6 too.
So they will select what they consider to be the 6 most viable pitches that can be shot here at Central as a short film. And then those will be presented in front of a live audience. Between Thursday and when the Pitch Fest actually occurs during the festival, you will have another 9 days to perfect your pitch. In those 9 days, you're going to work out all the bugs. You're going to rehearse it so that you don't have to look at a piece of paper and read your pitch to the audience, because I guarantee you will not be emotionally engaging if you do this. Know your story, know your characters, be able to talk to your audience, make eye contact. Yes?
Once the 6 pitches are chosen, the board will work with those people and like make sure their pitches are ready for presentation.
When I have pitched, I made a pitch to a series of networks up in Canada, and the executive producers and I, we rehearsed the hell out of that pitch for a full week. We probably put 30 hours into simply having a conversation with the executives so that when we were talking to them, they would know what is it that we are presenting and try to get them excited. The sad end of the tale is it didn't get a green light. But I made a lot of great contacts. And if you get a no to your pitch, and most of the time you're going to hear a no, use your no to do research. Well, if you don't like this, what do you like? Get email addresses, get phone numbers, make a connection that you can use later on in your career. When somebody says no to your pitch, don't take it personally. It's never personal. It's just not right for them at that point in time. So, the 6 elements of a successful pitch, they're all listed on this. I'm not going to go through the exhausting detail because there is kind of exhausting detail in this. But in general, first thing you should do, personal connection. You want to connect with the audience that you're speaking to. And you want to establish a connection between you and the story you're telling. Every time I've pitched something, I've been asked the question, where did you get this idea? What's this based on? And I always have a compelling answer. A compelling answer that is the start of my story. Everything is such a condensed time frame. Everything is connected to your story. So figure out, how do you answer the question, where did you get this idea? It's the launching point for your pitch. Somebody asked, it's turned into something very different. Where did you get the idea for this story? Well, my sister was getting a divorce from her abusive husband. And I wanted to write a story that was kind of a wish fulfillment, that would make her feel better about her circumstances. And that was the start of it. And I used that starting point, that was my personal connection to this story, and then it started with my sister being in a really bad place. And so I thought, okay, what character would kind of be this wish fulfillment scenario that would make my sister feel better? So when you're pitching a story, is it something just like, I had a dream, and this was like the centerpiece of the dream? I read this article in the newspaper, and there was this line, this element that just stuck with me. So all of you, I hope, have ideas that you're kicking around. Where did they come from? What is your personal connection to the story? Have a title? Don't say, I don't know what the title's going to be. Blah, 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 blah. You haven't thought about it enough to give it a title? Give it something meaningful. Give it something memorable. Yeah?
Can it be a working title?
Yeah, as long as it's a damn good working title. I was when I was at Vulcan, we were doing a documentary with Michael Apted, who's done documentaries and feature films. We couldn't figure out what the title was going to be. He came up with it, Me and Isaac Newton. It's a very memorable title, and it's a story about scientific genius. That was what the documentary was about, scientific genius. Well, there are few that have made a bigger mark than Isaac Newton. That became our title. Have a title that is going to be memorable. What's your genre? What's the tone? Is this going to be something that's dark yet comedic? Is it a romantic comedy? Is it a horror film? You're really putting out the really generic cornerstones of your film as you're starting. You want to build your story in concentric circles. Start with, what's it called? What's your movie going to feel like? What's your log line? Log line is essentially a one-sentence description of what is your movie. What gets the ball rolling? What's cool and fresh about it? It's not just, don't try and jam a first, second, and third act into your movie. Your log line is the hook. What's going to grab that audience's attention? Plant a flag, this is the world we're going to inhabit. This is the character whose life we're going to follow. And this is why this is cool. Think in those terms. So you're just starting it. That is your inner circle, your log line. Everybody now knows, generally, where on the map your film exists. Then you start building out from that. And you created that touchstone that your audience can always come back to and understand every additional piece of information. Where does it fit within the world that you're creating? So you start by introducing the world. Is it a college campus? Is it Prohibition era Chicago? Is it a sci-fi movie? Now, some people will think, oh, it's a nondescript American college campus. There's no such thing as a nondescript American college campus. Every world is unique. If your world is completely generic, it's a boring world. Every film story takes an audience someplace they have never been before. How many of you seen Animal House? Is that a nondescript American campus? No, it's very unique. Your world should be equally unique. What are the rules of this world? What are the social norms? Is it simply the world we inhabit here? Or are you looking at, okay, it's an American campus, it's at Central Washington University, but it involves hackers. Well, what are the ethics of hackers? What's the world? If you are a college student at Central Washington University and your goal is to break into the NSA mainframe with your buddies, man, you live by a different set of rules. Establish the world your story takes place in. You're building out from that center. Log line, the world, the rules by which that world operates. Introduce your main characters. Okay, we know the world, we know the premise. This is the protagonist. And remember, this is a short film. It's not, unless I'm very mistaken, it's going to be really hard to do an ensemble piece in a 6 to 8 minute movie. Who's your protagonist? Who are we, whose life are we tapping into? Now, again, you've got 2 to 3 minutes to do all of this stuff. Be brief, be concise, be razor sharp in the adjectives you choose. how do you describe your protagonist? Find a way that people go, oh, I get it. I get who that character is. Find really accurate, vivid ways of describing your protagonist. Why should we care about your protagonist? I suggest having one vice and one virtue. He's really, really good with, his interpersonal skills are great. He spends Sundays working with disadvantaged children. But you know what? He's a heroin addict. Have any of you seen Half Nelson? Okay, stars Ryan Gosling, kind of a really dark little independent film. He plays a devoted high school teacher who goes out of his way and breaks rules to help one of his students who's in trouble. He's also an unrepentant heroin addict. Fascinating character. What's fascinating about your character? Think in terms of, give me a vice, but really give me a virtue. Why do we care about this character? Why are we going to be rooting for this character to succeed? What about backstory? You should know your character's backstory, but how much do you reveal in a pitch? Only reveal backstory to the extent that it is relevant for the events that we will see unfold on screen. I don't care about his trauma in kindergarten unless this film somehow touches upon his life in kindergarten. He's going to take revenge upon his kindergarten teacher. So, backstory. Again, you got 2 to 3 minutes if you're going to include any kind of backstory in order for your audience to really understand the richness of your character. Make sure it truly matters. You can go into deeper backstory when you're building out your full script. But for the pitch, every syllable needs to count. If you're presenting supporting characters, I suggest you present them highlighting their function. How do they support your protagonist? They're called supporting characters because that's what they do. They support your protagonist. So when you're pitching, if you're going to be describing any supporting characters, how do they support your protagonist? So you've got your protagonist. The other dominant character would be your antagonist. Whether it be a person, a situation. Is this a story about a man against himself? Who is your antagonist? Very often, antagonists are kind of a mirror image of your protagonist. Darth Vader, in many, many ways, is the same character as Luke Skywalker. It's just that coin is flipped. So, describe your antagonist. What are the forces keeping your protagonist from reaching his or her goal? That's the role of the antagonist, to thwart your protagonist's goal. Okay, you've got your log line. You're building out, you're describing your world, you're describing your main characters. Now we know, okay, this is where our story begins. This is who we're going to be watching. Now you can start describing your plot. And again, this is 2 to 3 minutes. Don't spend 2 to 3 minutes doing everything I just talked about. Keep it really focused. So, your plot. Focus on just the main events. What's central to your story? If people want to know more, know what that more is, but it's not part of your initial pitch. Be ready to go deep in response to your audience's questions. But just focus on what's truly important. What is the absolute essence of your story? For God's sake, don't fall into the monotony of, oh, this happens, and then this happens, and then that happens, and then later this happens. Nobody cares about stuff that just happens. When you're revealing plot, reveal it in the context of your characters' lives. If you reveal plot as it relates to your protagonist, you're giving your audience a reason to care about what is happening because it now means something. If it means something to your protagonist and your audience cares about your protagonist, everything that happens now has meaning to your audience and they will become emotionally engaged. So when you're describing what's happening, describe who it's happening to and what does it mean. Then he got a letter in the mail. And it was the letter he was dreading because he knew that this was the letter that was going to send him to Vietnam, where his brother had died. Well, you could say, and then he got a letter, and then he went to the draft board. But if you describe what these actions mean to your character, your audience will be able to follow and care about what you're talking about. And don't tell a story that's just linear. Have surprises. Have reversals. And I urge you to call out those surprises and reversals. Yeah, and he opened the letter fully expecting it to be his draft announcement, only to discover that he was the winner of the Publishers Clearinghouse. And his friend had snuck it into a letter from the draft board. You call that out just because your audience is going to go, wow, I wasn't seeing that. That was so cool. Again, you're entertaining them. You're mesmerizing them with your storytelling abilities. Even if it's a short film, you should have structure to it. 3-act structure, foundation of Western literature. Beginning, middle, and end. I encourage you to call out those act breaks in your pitch. So at this point, Susie went to the draft board to confront them about Johnny getting that letter, which takes us to the beginning of the second act. It could be something as obvious as that, but if you call out those act breaks, your audience will know where you are in your story. If you ramble on about this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens, your audience may be thinking just kind of like, oh my God, is this all in the first act? Unless you lay out a crystal clear roadmap. No, this is where we are at this point in the story. Don't make your audience guess. If they guess, if you're forcing them to guess, then you should also assume that they're going to guess wrong. Don't take that risk. Act 1 should take more time than the other acts because you're establishing the world, you're establishing your characters. It's mostly about setup. Okay, once you've set stuff up, what are the rising complications? Rising complications takes you to the end of the second act. You have a major reversal, which you are going to call out. And then we are racing towards resolution. How does this all end up? Call it out that way. Make it crystal clear to your audience. The actions your protagonist takes should be what reveals your protagonist's true character. And the changes your protagonist undergoes will reveal what your movie is truly about. If your character is exactly the same at the end of your story as they were at the beginning of the story, nothing has changed. And chances are you've got a boring movie. Now, in feature films, there are absolutely exceptions to this. Have any of you seen Forrest Gump? Forrest Gump is exactly the same character at the end of that movie as he is at the beginning. However, the audience's understanding of who that character is radically different. So something significant has to change. Either your character, the world they inhabit, or your audience's understanding needs to be different at the end of the film than it was at the beginning. And you should call out when you're pitching what that difference is. And that difference is most likely where the actual meaning of your film is going to be found. And as a result of what's unfolded, Johnny finally realized X. Well, Johnny has now grown as a character. Because the story in that scenario was about Johnny coming to the difficult realization that X. And that is your character's arc, that change. Finally, what do you want the audience to think and feel when your movie is over? You need to know the answer to those two questions. What do you want the audience to think? What do you want them to feel? That's what they're going to go home with. If some agent at William Morris watches your film and goes, "Oh my God, that was great," it's going to be because you took that audience on a journey and they thought it was awesome and something changed, and at the end they had something substantive to think or feel. And it could just be something like, "Oh my God, that was so funny." But there's some meat on the bones. There's some entertainment there to be had. Something worth talking to others about. So I want to show you a couple videos. The first one is a panel that was hosted by the Producers Guild. The Producers Guild tapes a lot of things and puts them on their website. I strongly encourage you to put the Producers Guild website as one of your favorites in your computer. And go to it. It's often incredibly valuable advice from people who do this for a living. The other video I'm going to show you is from the Napa Valley Film Festival Pitch Fest, showing you some people who are going through exactly what we're going to be doing at the Ellensburg Film Festival, getting up in front of an audience and pitching their story, hoping that the panel of judges, in this case they're from like the Weinstein Company and a number of other prominent producers, that panel deciding which of those pitches they thought are the best.